It's no secret that Casio has been making major strides in getting themselves up into the top tier of producers in the digital piano space. And two of the most impressive products from the last several years has been their hybrid grand GP510, as well as the more recent PXS7000, which itself got into the Rob Report. No small feat for a magazine usually showcasing luxury watches and private jets. But the mid-range of their home digital lineup, namely the PX and the AP series, was kind of begging for an update. Now with the release of this AP-S450 and the 550 and 750 along with it, have they finally rounded out their full lineup? Here are the four things that really jump out at me about this new instrument. I think the first thing that's going to strike anybody about this instrument, and really this whole series, is the emphasis on their cabinet and the aesthetic look and feel. I think they're riding off the success of their PXS 5000, 6000, and 7000, which received numerous accolades, not just for the musical experience, but also the look and the overall styling of that product. And they're definitely trying to bring in a lot of those elements, including the high gloss finishes, touchscreen surfaces, and overall modern, sleek look. Now the S undoubtedly stands for slim because this is quite a compacted form factor, but probably the most noticeable part or distinctive part of this cabinet is this high gloss piece of cabinetry that's really where the key cover would normally be. And so when you approach the instrument, that really catches your eye until you sit down and realize this is actually more like the HAL 9000 talking to you while you're playing the instrument. Allow me to demonstrate. Now the first time I saw this, there was this skeptical kind of, I don't know, party pooper side of me that wanted to hate on it because it really adds no musical value and it doesn't really add to the physical aesthetic of the instrument. But they obviously focus tested this because you know what? I actually kind of like it. And if there's anything about an instrument that makes anyone, particularly who is not already a piano player, more interested and more excited to sit in front of an instrument and play around, I am all in favor of it, regardless of what it looks like. Now besides that, they've kept the control panel off to the left incredibly simple. And this is both a pro and a con. There are really two ways in which you wind up interacting or using this instrument. One is the most basic functionality, which is really just switching between the various sounds which they've got marked in front of the keys. But to go any deeper than that, you really have to be using the Casio Music Space app. It is almost laughable to think that you're going to be able to access all of the various functionalities across the recorder, across the acoustic simulator, across the audio and MIDI playback, all using shortcut commands, because there are 5 or 6 pages in the user manual just with different modes and shortcut commands. It's basically not really usable. So the app is free. It works with Android and iOS. I believe there's a little more functionality with the iOS, but I would strongly suggest for anybody engaging with a modern Casio piano, and particularly this new AP series, just do yourself a favor and get used to using it with the app almost all the time, or certainly when you're first engaging in it and you might be going through and playing with some custom settings. The next thing that really impressed me was the updated Hamburg sample. Now this is a Hamburg Steinway. I'm sure because of licensing they can't actually use the word Steinway in any official literature, but the two pianos that they've sampled here for their fatter samples are a Hamburg and a New York Steinway. The Hamburg, I believe, is the number 1, the New York is the number 2. And in talking to the Casio folks down at the NAMM booth, there seemed to be some consensus that this was kind of at a minimum about a 5-layer sample, which for this price point in a piano, especially when we're talking about like high fidelity stereo samples, is a pretty deep, pretty rich sample experience. And particularly when you're playing this with a set of headphones, the detail and the lushness of that sample are super fun to play on. It really reminds me a lot of the newer SKEX competition grands that you get on some of the upper end on Kawai's CA and Nova series pianos. So here's a sample of both the Hamburg, then the New York, with no modifications to the factory settings to those sounds. So while both samples are great to play on, you definitely notice, or at least I notice, much more of a rounded, even kind of acoustic envelope around all of the different velocity layers that I'm getting on that Hamburg, and just, I don't know, a little more refined sense of the nuances of that tone. So quite related to those samples is my third item of discussion, the speakers. As more and more customers who normally would have been entry-level acoustic customers now become digital customers, the standards and the nuance that they need to be able to deliver have simply increased. And so this is industry meeting demand. But what Casio has done on here, I don't think I've seen on any other instrument. And I'm not sure whether this is a more successful or less successful design. I just know it's unique. What Casio has done here is they've positioned the main lower speakers up into the cabinet of the instrument, but they have exposed the back of the speaker cone underneath the piano with a grill, so that all of your indirect sound is actually what's going down into the floor, and all of your directed sound is actually coming up through the cabinet, where it's resonating against the wood surfaces as well as through tone ports. In addition to that, there are two tweeters that are positioned right about here that are giving you a little extra top end resonance and some of those more mechanical sounds coming out of your acoustic simulator. And so quite distinct from what you get on, say, the most recent PXS models, where there's a ton of very direct high-end detail, this is a much more dispersed sound. So there is literally not a single shred of top-end harshness coming out of this instrument, while somehow not losing any detail. And this is quite the accomplishment, especially given that for a relatively small cabinet, this is equipped with a 40-watt speaker system, so you've got a good amount of power coming out of here. And then the fourth thing I really noticed here was the key action. They've gone to a solid wood key. Now, the key pivot length on this isn't particularly long. It's not like we're talking about one of the CA Kawai series where you've got almost basically a full acoustic wood key action. But this is very akin to like the all-wood actions that Yamaha is putting in some of its mid-range and upper mid-range digital pianos. And it certainly does give a much more authentic sense of the dynamic inertia of the key. Because as much as you can counterweight that, there's just a certain feel that the key has when you strike it and it's not striking a hollow key. Not only does it reduce the mechanical noise within the key, but there's something about the motion that feels a little more authentic. It's a very minor thing, but I know that these keys are going to feel a little bit more natural with, say, 5 to 10 hours of playing on them, because the key surface is a little bit slippery for my liking, even though I know that all of that extra texture is actually going to absorb a little hand oil pretty quickly, and it's going to get to that nice blend of glide and stickiness that I happen to like on a key. But all in all, aside from maybe the Casio GP510, this is by far the most satisfying action I've ever played on a Casio piano. Now, in terms of some other specs, we've got a maximum polyphony of 256. I already mentioned that the speaker power here was 40 watts. We've got in the neighborhood of, I think, 24 tones that are on board. And then beyond that, a real myriad of other features and editability that you can, as I've said and can't emphasize enough, substantially easier to access that through the app. It also comes with Bluetooth audio and Bluetooth MIDI, so you can feed Bluetooth audio to this lovely speaker system and use it as a sound source. And it's equipped with a pair of headphone outputs. Look out for our upcoming reviews on both the 550 and the 750. But until then, thank you so much for tuning in. Please consider subscribing if it's the first time you stop by the channel. If you're back again, thank you so much for sticking with us. We really, really appreciate this growing community of music lovers from all over the world. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube. We'll see you again soon.